moving on, our next accessibility expert is Maya Sellon. Maya is the Inclusive Design and Digital Accessibility Principal at Shell. She has shifted the way how organizations think, design, and operate thanks to her passionate advocacy and leadership for ethical design and digital accessibility. She'll be presenting Considering the Human in Human-Centered Design, Being Human in a Tele-Everything World. Maya will be joining us very shortly on this topic, but I'm quite excited.
Yes.
It's going to be... Oh, there she is. Fantastic.
Hello, Maya.
Great to see you. Thank you for being with us on QualityForge. It's a pleasure to see you.
You as well. Thank you for having me.
The stage is all yours.
The stage is all yours. You can dive straight in.
Okay, perfect. Well, hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm really glad you're here. I'm Maya Sellon. I've got brown eyes and I'm mixed race, but you can't quite tell which ones. I've got a short haircut, the sides are buzzed, and my natural dark brown, and the top is a purplish white. And today I'm wearing a bright orange shift dress to celebrate the sunny weather I find myself in. And before we get started, I am a little bit of a wild card. So I'm here representing myself. All of the thoughts and opinions in this talk are mine and mine alone. And I have a little bit of a confession to make as well, because I shouldn't be here. This isn't my comfort zone. I should be up here. Oops. I am living out my fantasy here. I've photoshopped myself right onto the bridge of the Starship Enterprise along with my favorite crew. That's me at the helm, and Data's over at Ops with Picard and Riker looking very intently over Data's shoulder at something on the view screen. And of course, we've got Worf and Geordi hanging out in the background. I was in high school when Star Trek Next Generation first started airing on TV, and I fell in love with the characters and the idealism of the Star Trek universe. Space, the final frontier. I still honestly get shivers every time I hear that line. For the non-fans out there, Star Trek is a humanistic science fiction TV series about a group of explorers who go on missions throughout the universe in their starship, the Enterprise. At home, I geek out about Star Trek Next Gen. But at work, I geek out about accessibility and the power of inclusion. I'm sure we've all had occasions where we felt excluded or overlooked. Not the right height, not the right shape, not the right personality, not the right accent, not the right whatever. And speaking of accents, not just my own. This is a photo of my mom in her teens. That's her second from the right. It's a formal family portrait in black and white. She's standing in the back with her three sisters in formal kimono, and that's my grandmother and grandfather seated up front in formal Western clothing. Mom moved to the US from Japan a little before I was born in DC. I don't remember DC, but I do remember what it was like growing up in North Carolina. I remember long evening hours watching my mom painstakingly transcribe notes from her English classes at the local community college. I remember eagerly answering all of her English questions, including the ones she didn't ask. My annoyance with strangers who would give her nicknames because they couldn't be bothered to learn to pronounce hers. It's Yayoi, by the way. Is that hard? And my outrage with people who would, in my very opinionated view, pretend they couldn't understand her because of her accent. I remember my own bad behavior as well and being embarrassed by mom's accent. This is a small meal from Burger King, a drink, a surprise that remind me of an occasion when I was a teenager. Mom asked if I wanted to go to Burger King for a treat, and of course I said yes. So we hop into the car, she pulls us up to the drive-thru, asks me what I want, turns to the monitor and proudly places an order for large fries, please. Oh, Mom, large fries. I just blurted it out without thinking. We heard some muffled laughter coming through the monitor. Mom laughed it all off as well, as I recall, but it wasn't exactly one of my finer moments. I was almost 30 when I moved to the Netherlands. I started my own journey learning a foreign language, had my own fair share of pronunciation mishaps. This is a photo I took at the beach, standing on the pier late one afternoon in the fall. There's a beautiful, warm, late afternoon sky with fluffy clouds, people walking along the shore, and buildings in the distance, including the dome of the famous Kurhaus Hotel. And while this country may be small, its words are as long as its people. Scheveningen. Scheveningen. That's the name of the beach, and it took me forever to learn to pronounce that, much less spell it. I remember standing on that pier, thinking back on all my years in the country, sheepishly recalling the flies incident and thinking to myself how brave my mom had been all those years ago to move to a foreign land with a foreign language and foreign people. The reason I shared all of this is my life has led me to work in a field that cares about including everyone. To me, accessibility, digital inclusion, it's not about rules or regulations. It's about people. People who just want to be able to do the things everyone else takes for granted. But okay. I hear you. This is a tech conference and we're techies. We want to build cool stuff for people. But are we building for all people? There's an H in HCD, and that's what I'm here to talk to you about. So what is HCD anyway? I looked up some definitions, and it struck me as a little bit odd that the top 3 sources I found all started with defining human-centered design as a problem-solving technique. Harvard Business School says HCD is a problem-solving technique that puts real people at the center of the development process. I wonder who these real people are. Wikipedia says HCD is an approach in problem solving commonly used in design by involving the human perspective. But okay, which humans? IDEO says HCD is a creative approach to problem solving. It's a process that starts with the people you're designing for. Okay, but hang on a second. What if someone else wants to use your stuff? It wasn't until I checked the Interaction Design Foundation, co-founded by Don Norman, father of UX, that I came across a definition that started to resonate with me. Human-centered design is a practice where designers focus on people and their context. Here still, though, I could ask which people. The article goes on to talk about how Don Norman was helping designers understand their responsibility to the people they were designing for. That, however amazing the technology was they were working with, the problem was that the designers kept overlooking the human limitations of the people who had to use their designs. As the article put it, the trouble with users is they're only human. I admit I got a pretty good chuckle out of it when I read that, but it also made me ask myself, what does it mean to be human? Is there a difference between being a human and being a person? Are we less human if we look different, think different, speak a different language? Does being smaller or weaker than someone else mean less important for something that's being designed or built? The idea of what makes a human is a concept that's long been debated and narrated in literature and film, including my favorite program. In season 2, 1989, an episode aired called The Measure of a Man, wherein a hearing was convened to determine if Data was a citizen with rights or property of the Federation. It was super dramatic for me because I really identified with Data. I thought we were alike in many ways. Well, except for the superhuman intellect and strength, of course. For the non-fans, Data was the name of one of the main characters on the show. We had greenish skin, yellow eyes, and a slicked back brown haircut. He was a vital member of the bridge crew, leadership team on a starship, a science officer, and a one-of-a-kind, self-aware android. Data was my favorite character. His life mission was to understand what it meant to be and to try to become more human. And as a bicultural kid growing up in the deep south of the US, one language, one culture at home, another language, another culture when I walked out that front door with no real visual identity. No one ever correctly guesses where I'm from. I really connected with Data's quest for self-identification and belonging. In The Measure of a Man, a high-ranking member of Starfleet had decided he wanted to use Data as a template, duplicate him, deploy them in dangerous situations, and save human lives. The twist was this. In order to duplicate Data, Starfleet had to take him apart. And they had no idea what magical combination of life experiences, friendships, algorithms, and heuristic nets made Data. So if they took Data apart, could they put him back together as Data again? That was the premise of what was, for me, one of the most gut-wrenching, thought-provoking episodes of a TV series I had ever seen in my young life. It challenged me to think about what it meant to be human. So now I ask you, what does it mean to be human? Is it the color of my skin, my ability to see or hear clearly, my ability to move about and interact with things, or my ability to communicate effectively? In 2021, Pew Research Center published an article. They spoke to nearly 1,000 innovators, designers, developers, business, and policy leaders about what they thought life would be like in 2025. Yeah, next year. Post-pandemic and other crises in 2020. The article title reads, "Experts say the new normal in 2025 will be far more tech-driven, presenting more big challenges." The view of most of the respondents was that people's relationship with tech would deepen, that we would come to rely increasingly on digital connections for work, education, healthcare, commercial transactions, and social interactions. A number of them referred to this as a tele-everything world. 6 main themes emerged, 3 bad and 3 good. Let's start with the bad, shall we? Growing economic inequality as the tech and knowledge gap between the haves and have-nots widens. Big tech companies gaining increasing power and reducing user privacy and control. Increased misinformation and the relentless manipulation of public opinion. Now, quickly on to the good. New reforms aimed at racial justice and social equity as critiques gain support. Enhanced quality of life for many as flexible work arrangements are embraced. Yeah, you hear that, Amazon? Technological enhancements that allow people to live safer, more productive lives. Some potential for real positive change. but I have to ask myself, the lives of whom? Who will we be including in this new frontier? And who will we leave behind? The designers and builders of these exciting new technologies have to remember we are all different. In 2020, the World Economic Forum published an article entitled, "Here's Why AI Needs a More Diverse Workforce." The article started with the story of an 11-year-old girl whose father had signed her up for a robotics camp without telling her. When she arrived and discovered there was one other girl, the other 11 attendees were boys, all with previous programming experience, she was furious at the disparity and decided to team up with the other girl to challenge the boys. And yeah, you guessed it, they beat the boys in every challenge. The article goes on to talk about the decline in women's representation in the tech workforce since the 90s, the even lower representation of Black and Latinx employees, as well as a lack of diversity amongst entrepreneurs and venture capitalists. The key message, and I am paraphrasing heavily here, our tech workforce, including AI, doesn't reflect humanity. It isn't diverse enough to reflect the concerns of the populations being impacted. We must address the diversity gaps in our tech workforce today to mitigate bias in the systems of tomorrow. We need to make sure we include everyone. In June of 2023, the UK Parliament website published an article by the Communications and Digital Committee calling out the UK government for having no credible strategy to tackle digital exclusion. They accused the UK government of neglecting its citizens by allowing them to fall behind digitally. According to the article, 4 million people are unable to get online by completing a single basic digital task. And over the course of a year, 1 million had either cut back or canceled their internet due to affordability issues. As that Pew Research study predicted, the gap between the haves and the have-nots is widening. And even those who are getting by today might struggle in the future. Do you remember that Don Norman article and the quote that the trouble with users is they're only human? He identified back in the 80s that problems were stemming from the fact that people without specialist knowledge were using computers. Well, that problem hasn't gotten any better, and it's costing the UK economy up to £63 billion a year. That's billion with a B. How do we solve for digital exclusion in a cost of living crisis? How do we ensure we include everyone, regardless of their social standing, access to technology, physical or mental ability? In other words, how do we design for humans? All humans. Unfortunately, there's no easy answer to this, no checklist or cheat sheet we can refer to for all the answers. But what I can share with you is this. We can't build technology for everyone if we don't remember to include everyone. Sometimes it's more important to ask questions than have all the answers. You know, when I was working on this talk, images from one of my favorite memories just kept flashing through my head. You see, on my 49th, I signed myself up for my first tandem skydive. This is me and my instructor at 13,000 feet, soaring over the Palm Jumeirah in Dubai. I just so happened to be today. I still remember my heart pounding out of my chest when that check buzzer went green and sounded. The instructor leaned forward and asked me, "Are you ready?" And I think I managed to nod before he flung us out that plane door. The sun blasted me in the face. The air came rushing up so fast I could hardly breathe. But I took a breath and opened my eyes, and the views were stunning. The reason I'm telling you this is I think inclusive design is a lot like tandem skydiving. You need to know the rules, what you should and shouldn't do. You've got a rough idea how it's going to go, but every single time it's different. The experience is thrilling and a little bit scary. And you have to be brave. Take that leap of faith and trust that together your feet will touch the ground safely. As our time together draws to an end and we're about to say goodbye, I'd like to ask you to do just one thing for me, please. Think of someone you know who's been excluded digitally. For me, I think about Mom, who left her home and moved to a new country. I think about my elderly neighbor who needed help getting her new printer online. I think about Dad, who tripped and fell while he was out jogging and got stuck in a cast for months. Who are you thinking of? To be human is to feel, to think, to care, to act. So let's be brave. Let's show up and be seen. Let's embrace our differences, embrace the nerdery of it all. Let's embrace the diversity of being human and recognize it as one of our greatest gifts. Let's challenge the assumptions of who we're designing for. And remember to include everyone when we're building those really cool techie things. Let's remember to put the human back into human-centered design. Thank you. Thank you for listening, and live long and prosper.
Thank you, Maya.
That was incredible.
Yes, I was really mesmerized by your presentation, and I strongly believe that I was not the only one. We can read a lot of comments. People really enjoyed your presentation. So
Thank you so much.
You have worked in technologies for more than 20 years. Has it been interesting to see how the world of technologies has evolved over this time?
Oh, absolutely. I'm a huge gadget geek and tech nerd. So seeing the evolution from when I got my very first computer back in the 80s and, made my way onto the internet to now we're walking around with computers on our wrists or in our ears and in our pockets. It's absolutely fascinating. And I still dream of joining Starfleet and going into space someday, so who knows?
Wonderful. The second question for you. Have you always known that inclusive design and accessibility was a field you wanted to work in, and how did you sort of end up working there?
No, I did not know. I didn't know it existed, so I call it pure kismet that I encountered it. I just happened to be working at Shell, and a job opening came up in the brand team, and somebody there very, very kindly said, "Hey, I think you would be good for this." Little did they know they created a little monster that went around on campaigns all of the time, but that just did it for me as soon as I found out about it.
Yeah, so the stars basically aligned for you.
Absolutely, yes.
Wonderful. And from your experience, is it easy to keep in mind the human factor while working in tech? Or is it something you have to work on?
I wouldn't say it's necessarily easy to do. It's not that people don't care, because I believe fundamentally everybody does care and everybody wants to include everyone. But with conflicting priorities, with time or money, it can become difficult to advocate for this. And I think it's just a matter of learning what you should or shouldn't do and building that into the process from the beginning. So it's not an add-on, it's not an extra. Your designs don't become less beautiful. All of these myths that I could spend hours talking about, but so it can be difficult in that way. For me, once I learned out about it, I can't shut up about it, as you may have noticed. So in that way, it's not difficult. And when you see the impact that you can have when colleagues have reached out to say thank you, that will sustain me for the rest of the year.
And that's a good point, because it also touches on what we've heard from our previous speakers, that from the get-go, if you have that mindset, if you move forward with that, you will not forget it as easy, and it does transfer through the process. It's something that can keep growing with you.
Yes, absolutely.
Wonderful.
Okay, Maya. Thank you for joining us today. It was truly amazing.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure to have you.
Thank you for having me.
You pleased a lot of Star Trek fans in our comments as well. They loved your intro.
Great.
Okay, bye-bye.
But thank you, and yes,